I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet tonight, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any other Indigenous people present. I'd also like to recognise that we are on unceded land and that Indigenous people have been custodians of the lands and waterways in Australia for more than 60,000 years, and they're our first teachers, and that's really important to us in the Faculty of Education. So good evening and welcome to the fifth and final Dean's Lecture for 2024 and the first Hope Lecture as part of the Dean's Lecture. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Jim Watterston, the Dean of the Faculty of Education, and I did say to a few people tonight it's not all about me, but this, after 7 years, is my very last Dean's Lecture, so I feel quite nostalgic and honoured and privileged to have been part of this process. It's a great job being the Dean of the faculty, but this is a high point, and coming along to see so many wonderful international, national, local presenters has just been a gift in terms of my willingness to be there and learn a lot about a whole range of different things. And on that note, can I acknowledge Professor Christine Brunella, who 1 year ago was the Dean's Lecturer, came to us from Finland, and you were so impressed by it that you've come back to be here tonight, so thank you very much. I think you're part of the whole group. I didn't realise John was such a rock star. There are so many people here. This is probably the first time that we've ever completely filled this forum. So, John, well done. Very. So tonight's lecture is called the Hope Lecture. The acronym HOPE stands for Health, Outdoor and Physical Education. Hope also brings with it a sense of optimism about the future and possible futures that lie ahead for education. This event honours a significant milestone in Australian education, celebrating the launch of the first university course in physical education, which began right here at the University of Melbourne in the late 1930s. Many of you will recall this lecture was previously known as the Fritz Duras Memorial Lecture. However, recent historical research at the university, conducted as part of the writing and publication of Doombak Goobgoo Wana, a history of Indigenous Australians in the University of Melbourne, revealed that Dr Duras was involved in the Eugenics Society of Victoria. It's been challenging for everyone, but to continue to recognise the contributions of the staff and graduates who were not associated with this society, we have renamed this the Hope Lecture. I just want to say that John, this has been really challenging for John, and he's been graceful, caring and respectful in the way that we've gone about this process and shifting the name of the lecture. And so, John, we really thank you for the hard work that you've had to do to make sure this is done smoothly and has continued to be recognised as we go forward. I also welcome the representatives and friends from ACHPA in Victoria, the Australian Council for Health, Physical Education and Recreation. You've been with us for nearly all of these lectures and we really appreciate it, so it's great to have your support here tonight. Now I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce our guest speaker, the rock star John Quay, and tell you about his fantastic career and education to date. Just let me say up front, John wrote this, just in case you... Just in case you think it's a bit odd, but anyway. John Quay's interest in education grew from a love of physical activity, which drew him into callings where this could be expressed. And after experimenting with a science degree, he enrolled in Teachers College. When physical education and environmental education are combined, the result is outdoor education, and this is where John landed as a teacher. In his early life, he was a qualified bushwalking instructor, cross-country ski instructor, rock climbing instructor and a whitewater kayak and canoe instructor. This is a bit that I'm blaming on John. Outdoor education offered John a unique perspective of the issues of education, ranging from the perception that his teaching was one long camping holiday to his teaching being worthless when measured academically. So I didn't want that to come from me. The conundrum gave impetus to John's academic career and continues to underpin many of the questions he asks of education. Philosophy of education is John's other passion, as he came to realise that addressing these education issues required digging through many layers of research, tracing back through centuries of theoretical work, which were asking fundamental questions about being human. Hence the title of some of the books he has published. Education, Experience and Existence in 2013, Philosophy, Death and Education, along with two other colleagues in 2023. Another of John's books, Understanding Life in School, received the 2016 Philosophy of Education Society of Australasia Book Award. John has been a visiting academic at universities in Germany, Finland and Scotland. He is a Fellow of the Australian Council for Health, Physical Education and Recreation and a Fellow of Outdoor Education Australia. He is currently a Professor in the Faculty of Education here at the University of Melbourne. Anyone who has had the pleasure of working with John or simply knowing John would agree that his positive, optimistic outlook and thoughtful demeanour makes him most fitting to deliver the 2024 Hope Lecture. Will you please now join me in offering a warm welcome to John to present Redeeming the Heart of Education and the Soul of Teaching and Learning.
Well, I hope I can live up to all that. And can I acknowledge too, Tony Duras is here, Tony of the Duras family. So I really appreciate your attendance, Tony. And hopefully this lecture lives up to your expectations too. So thank you, Jim, for the very kind words. Good evening, everyone. I also acknowledge the traditional owners of this land on which we are meeting, the Wurundjeri people and their elders, and all Indigenous people here tonight. And I take this opportunity to acknowledge family members, including my parents, my partner Lauren, children Patrick and Leah, and my brother Justin, and their friends. In addition, friends from school and teachers' college, friends and colleagues from the faculty, the university, other universities, and friends in general. Thank you so much for being here. I also recognise representatives from ACHPA Victoria. I know Adriana and Laura are here, Peter and Craig, and ACHPA Australia, the chair Sue Watman. ACHPA is the Australian Council for Health, Physical Education and Recreation, as you said, Jim, the subject association. So it is with pleasure that I warmly welcome all participants this evening. I really appreciate your attendance. Life is short, but through it we make many connections. I'm only able to stand here because of the support I've received from so many. Please note, everyone, that while Jim mentioned philosophy of education, I am aiming for an accessible presentation by avoiding overly technical and philosophical terms, because I've learned that these can often cause some misunderstanding, which is the opposite of what I'm hoping we'll achieve. The presentation has three parts. The first is focused on the heart of education, by which I mean the active centre of education, where education happens. And I have some ideas we can explore on that. The second part moves from where education is happening to the character of this happening, which is how I understand the soul of teaching and learning. This may be more clearly expressed by a question. Is the teaching and learning that is happening good? There are many ways to interpret such a question, and there is never a final answer. I shall build from the position I espouse on the heart of education in part one to a position on the soul of teaching and learning in part two. I'm interested in these. This is my soul of teaching and learning photo. I'm interested in these because, in my eyes, we're losing sight of both and suffering the consequences, hence the need to redeem them. The third part pushes further, applying the understandings from parts 1 and 2 to a position on the pathways through formal education. Here I aim to provoke thought about the structures of formal education driven from a bottom-up or inside-out perspective. In approaching the issues in this way, through these three parts, in this order, I'm hoping to impact the more systemic concerns of policymakers and leaders by way of the more intimate concerns of teachers and children, teenagers, young adults, indeed all who find themselves at the coalface in situations of formal education. All right, part one, the heart of education. My career in teaching began, as you've heard, in physical education and environmental education in Teachers College, which culminated for me in a subject focused on outdoor education, as taught by Sandy. You're here tonight, aren't you, Sandy? Thanks, Sandy, who's here this evening with her partner, Dean. Outdoor education has been highly significant for my development as a teacher. Following Teachers College, I spent around 10 years working in outdoor education, mainly with young people in the middle school years, teenagers. In preparation for this lecture, I roughly calculated the days that I spent in outdoor education, away on programs, camping and living with teenagers, around the clock, and conservatively reached a count of over 1,000 days, or the equivalent of being outdoors with students 7 days a week for 3 years. Now, that taught me a lot. Most profoundly, it taught me that education concerns experience. Not just experience understood as accrued expertise, as we might think when referring to an experienced teacher. Rather, education is happening as experience in the moment. But this moment is not just an outdoor education thing. It is a life thing, a living thing, and so a classroom thing too. However, I'm not only referring to the teachable moment as if the moment is some special event. The moment is this moment that we are all living now, of which teachable moments are one possible expression or interpretation. This moment that we are all living now is the pulsating heart of education. It is alive. This moment is not static, but rather filled with movement. Normally we overlook this moment because we are so close to it, so involved in it, but we can attend to it, pay attention to it in its living form if we so wish. Here it is. To comprehend it, you must access it in your own experience. Thinking this living moment involves simple awareness rather than analysis. It is not looking at something, but the act of simple perception, awareness. I'm using the word simple to highlight that this is the opposite of complex. You can attempt this simple awareness of the moment anytime you like. To attend to it, you access it in your own experience, and I invite you to try now. Very importantly, this moment isn't empty. In fact, it is full of understanding and emotion, and it is shared. Just have a look around you. We can analyse this moment by asking after the knowledge that is embedded in it, asking after the practices that shape it, asking after ourselves and the others who share it. Such analysis highlights that in this moment, we are occupied in a particular way. There are specific knowledges, practices, and expectations of who we are in play in this moment. For many of us here this evening, those familiar with lectures, this way of being occupied has a level of familiarity. We are familiar with this moment. We know, in basic terms, what will transpire, that someone will speak and share something we hope is of interest in some way and not boring or overly complex. We undertake the practices that are relevant, that when we enter, we should look for an appropriate seat, that we should be quiet and not talk, that we should look attentive even if not feeling that interested. We belong, be and become as the person that is expected, a point that early childhood educators have known for a long time. Who are you belonging, being, becoming in a shared way in this moment? This could be labelled very broadly as the lecture attendee. The lecture attendee is an occupation that expresses being the person, doing the practices, knowing the knowledge. I'm asking you to go with me on a much broader but also more moment-focused use of the word occupation. Being a lecture attendee here tonight is an example of an occupation. Indeed, we are always occupied in some way and thus always living some occupation. Parent, sibling, friend, colleague are all occupations in this sense. We have other common words we use in education that convey this occupational idea. Being a pupil, a broad word derived from child. Colleagues in Finland use this word. Being a student, one who pursues knowledge. According to the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers, we know students via their developmental and other characteristics. Being a learner, a word derived from learn, which itself means to acquire knowledge. According to the learner profile of the International Baccalaureate Organisation, we know learners via their dispositions and traits. Being a brain, a word etymologically derived from organ of thought or organ contained in the skull. According to the Australian Education Research Organisation, the brain is known via physical capacities related to learning. These are all occupational terms, even the brain. As teacher, I can position you all as brains, expecting you to do things in the way brains do and know things in the way brains know. As teacher, I can position you all as students. Being a student is an occupation. If I position you as students, imagining that we are all here for a university subject, then I'm aware that you will likely be focused on what the assessment tasks are, as these define what you need to know and do with this knowledge. And if this focus isn't enough to ensure your compliance, then I can employ classroom management techniques designed to enforce this expectation for who you should be out. Sorry, Leah. Please be aware that I am critical of these positions, student, learner, brain, because they are limiting educationally. There are so many more options and opportunities for belonging, being, becoming, for doing, for knowing. Let's switch now from emphasising the person to emphasising the curriculum as content. We'll do this via an example using the equation F equals ma. Force equals mass multiplied by acceleration, Newton's second law of motion, which is often taught and learned in Year 10 as positioned in the Australian curriculum. Here are some basic questions we may ask about F equals ma and indeed about any specific curriculum content. What is this? What is this for? And what is this for me? If we answer the first two questions in general ways, these may be typical responses. What is this? What is F equals ma? It is the science equation F equals ma, force equals mass multiplied by acceleration, or Newton's second law of motion. That's what it is. What is this for? What is F equals ma for? It is for understanding the relationship between the motion of an object and the forces acting on the object. These are typical ways to respond to these basic questions, and they are quite generic. However, if we ask the third question, then the moment at the heart of education becomes visible. What is this for me? What is F equals ma for me? Let's imagine such a moment as possibly experienced by a Year 10 science student. F equals ma for me is F equals ma is for me to use in answering science questions posed by the teacher or textbook, looking for givens in the question and applying the formula to hopefully arrive at the correct answer. I need to arrive at the correct answer, as this will equate to marks and grades and impacts how I am perceived as a Year 10 science student. Let's now imagine such a moment as possibly experienced by a Year 10 science teacher. F equals ma is for me to teach to my Year 10 science students as important science curriculum in the physical sciences, notably Newton's laws of motion. So these science students can, as stated in the curriculum, quantitatively analyse the relationships between force, mass and acceleration of objects. With these two moments, student and teacher, we can see F equals ma worked with differently. Now let's imagine a third moment relevant to F equals ma, as possibly experienced by a university engineering researcher. F equals ma is for me to use in designing equipment requiring application of Newtonian mechanics, equipment that features in research projects I'm engaged with, which may influence wider engineering knowledge and, if successful, will advance my academic career. For each of these occupations, the answer to the question, what is F equals ma for me, yields a much more detailed response that highlights a plurality of meanings for F equals ma, each emanating from the moment as experienced occupationally. So in summary, my part one takeaways are, be aware of this moment at the heart of the experience of education. Be aware that this moment is shared and is already full of understanding and emotion. Think of this moment as occupational, how one is occupied, being the person, doing the practices, knowing the knowledge and skill. Think carefully, empathetically, of how this moment is experienced for those we are teaching. What is this for me? I'm going to go straight into part two, the soul of teaching and learning. Oops. As I stand here, I'm gauging the moment with its understanding and emotion as best I can by reading faces and other body language and responding, adapting in the moment. Thus informed, I'm making decisions that impact our shared moment in various ways. And as I'm a lecturer or teacher, I'm doing so in order to manage, sustain, improve the educational character of this shared moment in the way I interpret it with the means I believe I have at hand. But such thinking does not only happen in the moment. As teachers, we have the capacity to plan ahead in great detail. We have the opportunity to imagine this future moment as we plan for it, to look into its soul, or at least make our best efforts to, because the moment is not simply my moment, it is shared and experienced by those I will be teaching. In this planning, we grapple with the many features of teaching and learning. As educators, we are pulled in many directions, and often these directions don't seem compatible with each other. For example, we need to ensure students learn specific knowledge and skill while also keeping these students engaged. We need to assess students as individuals while also encouraging them to work together. We need to take responsibility for student performance while also enabling them to struggle. We need to proactively address many social issues while also managing the classroom for learning and enacting disciplinary processes. The list goes on. To find a way forwards, we sometimes look to the notion of balance as a solution. We focus on one aspect, then the other, balancing the amount of time or attention given to both sides of the issue with the aim of keeping both viable. We search for a middle way. But balance is not the solution. Let me provide an analogy. Jan, do you mind giving me a hand now? Oh, thanks. Thank you, Jan. For the moment, is that all right? So this is my pride and joy, a recent birthday present. For those with knowledge of racing bicycles, Nadine, I know you're out there, Jan, others, it is an S-Works Tarmac SL8, as ridden by Remco Evenepoel, Lotte Kopecky, Belgians, I know. Yeah, sorry, Marianne Vos, maybe we could bring in, and other champions of road cycling. Now, many would suggest that in learning to ride a bicycle, the most important thing you have to master is how to balance. However, after years of riding, I could sit on this bicycle, Jan, and I could sit on this bicycle, I won't because I'll just fall over, but I could sit on this bicycle but not be able to balance easily. Thanks, Jan. Thanks so much. Because in order to balance, I have to get moving. I have to provide drive and I have to steer. Balance is only possible with these things happening together, and the bike connects these, it aligns them. The same applies in education. Thanks, Jan. We probably just, yeah, thanks so much. Thank you. Appreciate that, Jan. The same applies in education. Rather than focusing on balance, instead I need to focus on alignment, on getting my ducks aligned. These ducks aren't people, but the many features of education I'm grappling with. There are two well-known unit planning frameworks that I argue address the ideas of steering and drive in teaching and learning. Backward design influences steering, and inquiry garners drive. When brought together in alignment, these offer a way forward. Let me explain in more detail. Firstly, by unit, I mean the time period during which we undertake a coherent piece of educational work together. At university, a unit usually runs for a semester. In early childhood, a unit may run over a range of different time periods, from the very short to something more extended. In schools, a unit may run over a term, and sometimes be described as a topic. But I want to expand our understanding to include much more than just topics. In very basic terms, a unit will incorporate 1, learning outcomes, 2, various learning activities, and 3, assessment. Unit planning via backward design involves specifying these learning outcomes and then working backward from these, planning the learning activities to ensure that the learning outcomes are achieved. Backward design provides the destination we steer towards. Unit planning via inquiry involves seeking questions and investigating these to the point where some outcome is reached which may enable future action to be taken in the world. Inquiry provides the drive that gets us moving and keeps us moving. My argument is that both are needed in a particular alignment that has them working together. Balance is then a byproduct, not the explicit strategy. Let's have a closer look at the destination. From a teaching perspective, this is the learning outcomes, couched in some form of assessment. But learning outcomes aren't great stimulators of inquiry. At the end of this unit, students will be able to X, Y, Z. How can we, teachers, provide a more stimulating destination, somewhere we all want to go to get to? There are so many creative possibilities. To assist our creative thinking, generative AI can be useful, but it's not mandatory here, of course. This is thinking that any teacher can explore. However, on this occasion, let's use generative AI to speed up the process and unpack this prompt I've prepared for ChatGPT. I'm using the word creations to describe the destination, because getting to this destination through the unit will require creative work, inquiry type work. The numbers in green, here and here, are arbitrary but helpful for the prompt. Basic demographic information in red means that here we include the ages, the genders, the locations, and other basic information about those for whom the unit is being designed. We must include the people we are teaching. List of learning outcomes in blue means that here we list these, usually as defined by the formal curriculum or other documentation. The next sentence asks how the suggested creations connect with the learning outcomes and the people identified demographically. The following sentence asks for the shared occupations in play, who these people are asked to be via this creation in broad terms. The final sentence asks for the variables, which I shall call criteria, that provide more detailed directions to the destination, the achievement of the creation. Now let's put some material in there. So this prompt is aimed at developing a unit for Year 5 children, 10-year-olds in a co-educational school in Melbourne, using 2 content descriptions from the new Victorian Curriculum 2.0 in Mathematics, Level 5 in the Algebra strand. So let's see what ChatGPT suggests. So I'm going to use ChatGPT to help me out here for a second. Tad, are we able to switch now? Yep. So I'm just going to grab this whole prompt and I'm going to move it into ChatGPT. I haven't logged in, just the basic version. Throw all that in there and ask ChatGPT to do some thinking. Okay, so ChatGPT is just suggesting a few things. So here's one possible creation, a math board game, and it's giving me the justification. It's giving me a broad sense of what the occupation might be, and it's listing criteria that students would have to work with in order to achieve that creation. And you'll see that the learning outcomes are embedded in there. So that's one option. There's more, math recipe book. Creating a recipe book helps. And there's some new criteria. Classroom business project, a maths art installation, number fact posters. So they're just some that ChatGPT has suggested. Now, we can refine those based on interest. So we might want to put an interest in there. So let's refine. So we can refine that using ChatGPT pretty quickly and get some more ideas. But the key things again are that we've got a justification, we've got an occupation, and we've got criteria, and we've got certain things that are suggested. Further than that, we can ask generative AI for episodes. So episodes are a technical term I'm using to divide that unit up into a series of episodes, which are more than just lessons. And so for each episode, we have I'm going to use, ask it to develop 2 episodes here, and we'll have a precursor creation and a final creation, and you can see those words coming through. And so if I grab that prompt and throw that into generative AI, so we get different episodes coming through. So there's a first episode and a second episode. So that's just an example of how we can use ChatGPT, but the point here isn't about ChatGPT. The point really is about these different creations, the criteria, the occupation. Tad, we can flick back now if you like. Yep. Okay. All right, so now let's explore this pedagogically. So from the red side, the destination side, the various creations suggested by ChatGPT are possibilities that aid teachers in determining what the destination for the unit is. These creations are suggested based not only on the learning outcomes, but also on broad understandings of the people involved. These creations set up the occupational expectations for the unit, being the person doing the practices, knowing the knowledge and skill. Directions to the destination creation are provided by the criteria. These criteria include the learning outcomes. But as directions, these criteria include a lot more than that, as you've seen very quickly as we showed on the generative AI, enabling a much clearer understanding of how to get to the destination. From the green side, the drive side, getting to the destination using the directions raises questions. Lots of questions leading to lots of inquiries. These questions and inquiries are guided by interpretation of the directions. This means that questions and inquiries will include concern with the learning outcomes which are required for achieving the destination. Now let's work drive and destination together more closely. Having made a first attempt, draft creations are performed, produced, shared with one person or a small group of others in the class, with the teacher monitoring and supporting. In this sharing, specific feedback is provided by these others based on the criteria, as all are working with the same criteria, the same directions. This specific feedback is used to improve the creation, the performance product. Further rounds of feedback ensue with different people and their draft creations each time. In giving and receiving multiple rounds of feedback between different people, with the teacher monitoring and supporting, the criteria are rehearsed again and again via new questions, new inquiries. This means that determination of quality descriptors for the criteria can be developed with input from everyone in the class during these feedback rounds. During these feedback rounds, everyone's understanding of the criteria and thus the learning outcomes is further expanded, enabling keener focusing of future feedback rounds. The teacher provides specific content teaching when this is required. Such teaching is appreciated as it supports improvement of the draft creations, working towards achievement of the final performance product. Multiple episodes help build from one creation to the next, scaffolding this achievement. The first creation in the first episode is a formative assessment task needed to achieve the next creation. The final creation in the final episode is the summative assessment task, the destination. But let's also consider another situation where determining the creation, the performance product, is not fully within the teacher's control. For example, a high-stakes exam in a secondary school subject or a university subject. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not here advocating for high-stakes exams, but rather using this example to show that such a circumstance doesn't preclude the pedagogical practices I've mentioned. This unit plan, broad one, is for a university subject with a high-stakes exam as the third performance product. The episodes are in place, enabling identification of precursor creations, 1 and 2, supportive of quality performance in the examination. The criteria are also in place, focused on exam question development during tutorials as application of content learned didactically in lectures, enabling feedback rounds during tutorials, generating further inquiries and opening up discussions of quality. A major difference between this creative learning unit approach, for that is what we've been calling this approach, and a more traditional university unit is that the creative learning unit addresses the full expression of the performance product throughout the teaching and learning right from week 1. So right up here, we're starting to think about down here. In a more traditional unit, one that focuses on a topic, the students may spend most of the unit learning topic content. Performing this content by producing something for assessment comes mainly at the end, after the content is learned, to assess whether the content has been learned or not. Now, let's get back to the question of soul. Is the teaching and learning that is happening good? For me, as I'm hoping you can see more clearly now, this question is asking after the occupational alignment expressive of being the person, doing the practices and knowing the knowledge and skill that is set up by the unit. And the measure of this alignment is in the moment. The soul of teaching and learning, its character, is expressed at the heart of education in the moment. We are familiar with signs of occupational misalignment in the moment, such as lack of engagement, which of course impacts achievement of the learning outcomes. Occupational misalignment shifts the soul of teaching and learning away from what is good. But when such misalignments occur, then temptation is often to blame those we are teaching. They are just not being good enough students. They are the ones who are upsetting the alignment. The response then is to double down on classroom management techniques. But what if such occupational misalignment is an effect of the unit planning? As I mentioned earlier, the basic features of a unit are 1, learning outcomes, 2, various learning activities, and 3, assessment. Yet, if it is only these we are planning to align, then there's a significant element missing. In our planning, we need to ask an important question on behalf of those we are teaching. What is this for me? This question should be asked early and often in planning. Responding to this question reveals the character of the alignment. Be the person, do the practices, know the knowledge and skill. Who are we asking or expecting them to be? When this element is neglected in planning, it's not as if we delete it. It is still there, but we downplay it and so position student, learner and even brain as the dominant occupations. I hope you can begin to see now that student, learner and brain are very limiting ways of positioning those we are teaching. Such limits limit the creativity of the teacher to craft the moment educationally. And critically, they also limit the ways in which teaching and learning can respond to issues of well-being. Be the person, do the practices, know the knowledge and skill is a clarion call to considerations of well-being in the moment rather than approaching well-being via a bolt-on program. Not just personal well-being, but shared well-being, teachers included. So in summary, my part 2 takeaways are 1, unit plan for the moment occupationally, because this acknowledges all 3 elements, being the person, doing the practices, knowing the knowledge. What is this for me? 2, unit plan for alignment of all 3 elements because this impacts the soul of teaching and learning. Okay, last part. Part 3, formal education from inside out. Okay, so education reform is commonly initiated top-down or outside-in. Systemic aims identified by policymakers and other leaders tend to dominate, seeking to influence what is happening at the coalface of teaching and learning, often by tightening things up. We know there are many challenges currently in our education systems, but top-down or outside-in reforms are rarely proposed on the basis of the moment at the heart of education. As a provocation, I suggest that approaching education reform from this moment as bottom-up or inside-out offers another opportunity. If we continue in the direction inaugurated with parts 1 and 2 this evening, we can take the types of units planned with their occupational character and imagine these as steps along pathways through formal education. We understand that life works via occupational pathways after formal education. However, I am, as I've said, expanding the meaning of occupation beyond just adult jobs. This picture of an old wall offers a way of thinking about this expanded understanding of life as occupational. Each stone is an occupation, a shared occupation, with every occupation we have lived sedimented within us as we continue to build and grow. Each of us is different in this way, but we still share occupations. Yet within formal education, we consider the relevant pathways to be knowledge pathways, organised chiefly via academic disciplines. This construction, visible in school curriculum, is premised on the belief that pursuit and acquisition of knowledge by students and learners is the best way to prepare someone for their future beyond formal education. But this view of formal education is not completely accurate. Even in schools currently, we work with occupational pathways, but not in ways we perhaps expect. Let's take a look at how schools are organised. Two of the most significant features of schools are the academic program, all the academic subjects, and the co-curricular program, all the co-curricular activities. These are the two main educational pillars of the school. Interestingly, one is mainly focused on knowing, the academic pillar of course, and the other is mainly focused on activities, on doing, the co-curricular pillar. These pillars lead us to think that there is a separation between knowing and doing. Yet academic subjects all involve doing, practices of various sorts that I dare say we are all familiar with. And co-curricular activities all involve knowing, knowledge and skill. To bring them together, we need to acknowledge being. Be the person, do the practices, know the knowledge. Every school subject, every co-curricular activity is occupational in this way. My provocation is that we don't see it, and if we don't see it, we can't work with it. We don't see that our unit designs, whether curricular or co-curricular, need to acknowledge being the person, doing the practices, and knowing the knowledge and skill, because these are already all there. Being a Year 10 science student, grappling with F equals MA, as mentioned earlier, is occupational. Please note though, being a Year 10 science student is not equivalent to being a scientist or engineer, just as being a math student is not the same as being a mathematician, and being a history student is not the same as being a historian. Just go to the moment and you will see this. As teachers in our unit planning, we can be much more creative than that. Being a member of the Year 8 basketball team is similarly occupational. Being a Year 1 reader is occupational. Being a Wombat Room member eating lunch is occupational. Occupations chart pathways. Occupations emerge from previous occupations and open doors to future occupations. So rather than organising formal education explicitly around knowledge pathways with units defined by topic, could we explore occupational pathways through early childhood education, through school, through university and other tertiary education? As the creative learning unit approach that I've shared tonight suggests, occupations don't exclude learning outcomes, but instead ignite them as crucial for achieving the unit destination. They do this by opening up assessment, by opening up who one can be in school, not just after school. This is opposed to the tightening up we see so frequently today. Teachers, whether early childhood, school, university or other, are the creative professionals who live the shared moment at the heart of education with those they teach. They are the ones best positioned to impact this moment, to energise, animate, vitalise the soul of teaching and learning. Is the teaching and learning that is happening good? This is a question primarily for teachers. to ask of teachers, for teachers to ask themselves, and for teachers to respond to by using all that is available to them, both in their unit planning and in the moment. The question for policymakers and leaders is then, how do we better provision teachers to do this work? Thank you. I think that there's two sides to that. We were talking about this the other day, that we were talking about professional learning. And so, okay, well, we could do all this professional learning design, U-Butte professional learning programs, etc. But if teachers don't have the capacity in their workloads to actually engage with, those programs, then the key doesn't fit the lock. And I'm reminded of what Parsi said a few 2 or 3 weeks ago in this very room, when he talks about the number of hours that children in Finland spend in face-to-face education, sort of through primary and into lower secondary. He compares that to Australia. And many of us will have seen the figures that he talks about. I think it's 11,000 hours here in Australia, and in Finland it's 6,000 something. So the amount of face-to-face work, it seems to be the belief that, well, we need to do more of the face-to-face, more teaching to achieve things. And yet Finland offers us another, example of maybe we just need to do it a little differently. But to allow teachers the time to do this unit planning properly, to connect with colleagues, to do all this thinking and talking around the planning and reflecting on the teaching that they've been doing to improve it and work with it, rather than just, okay, we need more professional learning, let's try to push that into the system. We all know that there's a lot of limits on that one. But I don't know if that answers that question fully, but it's an approach, Sandy. Thanks for the question. Yeah, thanks, great question. I think with the way that we're teaching, so what I was trying to convey with the unit planning frame, the way we plan the units of work that we're doing, and the way we think of that planning occupationally, we need to find the alignment with and include who the people we're teaching are into the planning, and in that way plan units that people want to work with. So that I've really been thinking too about There's always one. Yeah, it had to be my dad. Your dad. Thanks, Dad. Sorry, he's going to get me later. We've been working on this with teachers and children at Auburn South Primary. And I just want to acknowledge the work at that school and also the terrible situation that's happened at Auburn South. It was such a tragedy to hear about. But the one thing that's emerged from that collaboration is the energy that the teachers have gained from this in the planning phase as well as in the teaching phase, generating engagement with the children they're working with while still achieving the learning outcomes. So what I'm trying to sell, if you like, is, you could say it's a bit of a holy grail. How do we achieve our learning outcomes and the children, the young people, the teenagers want to be there and want to get to that creation, that assess. So that's why I'm sort of talking about what's at the end of the unit. Where are we going with it? Is it something that is it a destination we want to get to? And if it is, and if we can craft it in that way, that can help resolve at least some of those issues about, behavioural issues which tend to come from, I don't know why I'm here, what am I doing here, why do I have to do this? And that sort of being expressed in other ways, in ways that put teachers and students sort of against each other, whereas we want them working together. You know, I can't imagine going to work and fronting up at work every day knowing that the people I work with, I'm thinking the students here, many of them don't want to be there. And, and trying to work in that scenario and then I'm caught in a sandwich, if you like, because on the other side, I've got all these work demands. I haven't got enough time to plan properly. I've got all things happening that just keep squeezing me in the middle and leading to situations, I think, like that. So I'm hoping that we can enable the teachers, give teachers more time, think about their work, enable them to take this banner up and, you know, improve the situation. Well, I think a key move is, you know, I've got the platform, so I might as well say, I've sort of watched.
Pre-prepared this one for you.
Thank you. Thanks, Britannia. You know, ever since PISA came along, the PISA test, you know, and, you know, politicians, Australia's been compared internationally. Politicians feel then it becomes their responsibility to do something about this. And so we get the emergence of a top-down approach. And so, but then that, you know, that high levels of standardisation because we want this to happen, and so it tightens up on teachers and what's able to happen in classrooms. So I'm suggesting that, you know, we need to sort of devalue the rankings a little bit, you know, not pay so much attention to those, to enable space for reform to happen from inside out. And I do remember reading Pasi's book and him talking about the 1970s in Finland, where there was a political moment where the government had a decision to make around whether it would be a top-down structure for their education system or that they would more professionalise the teaching profession to enable teachers to do that work, and they went in that direction, and that's where I see a big difference between us and Finland. I also, just one other quick comment, in terms of that loosening up and tightening down, I think in our system we loosen up school choice, so we've got a loose system at the school level. We want parents to be able to choose this from this and that school and this. In Finland, the choice of school is very tight. Basically, you have to go to your local school. In the classroom, Finland is loose. So Finland's tight at the school level. You're going to the local school, we'll fund all schools properly, and we'll leave it looser for the teachers to be professionals. In Australia, it's more, we're going to loosen up the school choice level, and, you know, parents, you can choose whatever school you want in a sense and within constraints, but at the teacher level, the classroom level, we're going to tighten up. So we've sort of gone the opposite in that way, and I don't know whether we're talking about that much. Anyway, yeah.
Thank you, John, and it's my pleasure and honour to offer a vote of thanks. My name is Jan van Driel, and as you can see, I'm a Professor of Science Education here at the Faculty of Education. I'd like to start by thanking Professor Jim Watterston for opening tonight's lecture and for managing or moderating the Q&A. When John and I meet, we tend to talk, and you wouldn't be surprised after what you saw, that we talk about cycling a fair bit, the Tour de France and all of that. And of course, it's an area where my expertise in science education intersects with that of John in outdoor and physical education. But seriously, I think it is very appropriate for John to deliver his inaugural professor's lecture as the first HOPE lecture, celebrating the first Australian university course in physical education. And you would remember that HOPE stands for Health, Outdoor and Physical Education, but HOPE, of course, is also carries an optimism, which I think is very typical of John, as already been said, and very important in today's times where we need optimism, we need hope in times where certainly a lot of young people get quite depressed and have mental health issues, not only in school, but what's happening in the world outside. So very appropriate. Professor John Quay is recognized internationally as an eminent scholar in at least two areas. One is outdoor and physical education, and the other, as already mentioned, is philosophy of education. He's conducted projects and published extensively in both these areas, but also, and importantly, he draws connections between those different areas and includes also other areas. Environmental education has already been mentioned. By doing this, he presents and he positions outdoor and physical education in broader context, both theoretically and from a social perspective. And his status, or maybe his popularity, is confirmed by this very full room tonight, and I think there was even a waiting list for people who couldn't even get in, so that's saying something. I will not even try to begin to summarize John's lecture, but I will highlight a couple of things that I find interesting and that were my personal takeaway messages from what he presented. First is that notion of the moment and that importance of being aware of the moment and who we are in that moment. I think that's something for me to think more deeply about, and I think that's also what you want us to do, John. Also, that the way that you stretched the idea of the meaning of the word occupation beyond what it regularly means, to include roles, or maybe roles is the wrong word too, but to think of being a student, or even the brain as an occupation, that's certainly challenged my thinking. And that question, I think, is very important, the question that where the for me becomes important. What does it mean? What is this for me? What is it what I'm learning for me? And connected to that, I would say, but you hinted at that, is also the question, why is this for me? Why would I want to learn this? And that leads me to the second bit, or your second part, what you called the soul of teaching and learning, where I was quite fascinated by how you showed that teaching, as we all know in this room, is a very complex endeavor, and it's not so much, as you said, balancing, but aligning a number of tensions. And the basic tensions between using inquiry as a drive for students to motivate their learning process, and a destination that doesn't need to be a rigid, upfront fixed standard, but can be developed and negotiated in an iterative process between teachers and students, while safeguarding, of course, that in the end the curriculum objectives are being met. I think that's a really inspiring idea, an important idea, because we all know how students, as I said, have mental health issues, but also often feel disengaged by what is happening in schools. Finally, your mantra, be the person, doing the practices, knowing the knowledge and the skills. Again, you highlighted, you emphasized that through your process, through your lecture, sorry. And that feeds into the things I've just said. And again, I'm not summarizing, I'm trying to highlight things that I picked up from you and that I'd like to think a bit more about and also talk about more next time when we have finished our discussion about the last Tour de France. We can talk about this. So finally, I want to conclude by asking all of you to join me in thanking John for his lecture. And then,
I'm going to tell a gift for you, John, as an educator and physical ed specialist and outdoor educator. I know that you're sportingly inclined, and winning trophies is a fantastic thing to have. But you're a Carlton supporter, so I know that you don't have many trophies. So we would like to recognise John with the trophy for a fantastic presentation. He's a fantastic person, and I think it's the audience here recognises everything that John brings to the table. So congratulations.